All right. As I said, we would talk to Robert Patman. He joins us now. I know he's busy, so we'll get straight into it. Robert, good morning to you. Lovely to see you.
Good morning, Sean.
All right. Look, first up, Trump now seems to be waving a stick at Putin rather than a carrot. What the hell's going on there?
I don't know, in the sense that Mr. Trump does pride himself on his flexibility. So far, he hasn't made much demands of Mr. Putin in substantive terms. He's simply asking him to accept the deal that's been accepted by the Ukrainians, which is a 30-day temporary ceasefire. But the signals coming from Moscow are not encouraging. They believe they want something firmer than a 30 days. And also, they've indicated they will not be negotiating about any of the territory they've annexed. So, in a sense, Mr. Zelensky has had to eat humble pie. He's gone back, he's kissed the ring, so to speak, and he's apologized. Anybody who witnessed that meeting between President Zelensky and Mr. Trump, Mr. Vance, I think he's not the only one who should have apologized, quite frankly. But anyway, let's move on. The interesting thing is, you're quite right. Mr. Marco Rubio has a slightly different view, I think, of Ukraine than Mr. Trump. The Rubio line is prevailing. They feel that Ukraine has genuinely made an effort to meet Mr. Trump's concerns, and now they're looking for something from Moscow. So far, they've been remarkably kid-gloved with the Russians. After all, Russia legally invaded the country. Mr. Trump has not publicly demanded they leave the country. He's simply putting some pressure on for them to do their bit in bringing about this temporary ceasefire.
All right. What about the rumour? I'm not sure. I was trying to trace down where it come from that we might be involved, that is New Zealand or New Zealand defence personnel, in some sort of ceasefire monitoring force with boots on the ground in Ukraine. Is that a real possibility? I know we're training at the moment infantry people who are serving, Ukrainian infantry people who are serving in Ukraine. Could we get more involved? Is there a possibility?
There's a possibility, but I would be cautious at this stage. We'll certainly have military representation in talks that are going on.
Oh,
the British
we do.
Well, there's talks about a peacekeeping force, and I think we do have some representation there. Not at the highest level, but we certainly have some representation in those talks. And Mr. Luxon said 3 weeks ago he was open to the idea. So we'll just have to see how this eventuates. As you've probably gathered, some military veterans have raised questions about whether we're actually in a position to make a meaningful contribution as a peacekeeper because of what they see as our equipment problems. And we certainly have underinvested in the military sector. It's the British floated this idea, British trying to present themselves as a bridge between the American understanding of peace in Ukraine and the European understanding. And one sort of halfway measure or compromise between the two is this British proposal, which is supported by Macron, which you could have some European troops as a peacekeeping force to maintain a peace that's been negotiated, at least in the short term.
Yeah.
The Russians are not keen on this, and they made it quite clear that they will oppose such a presence. So I think peacekeeping if peacekeepers go into Russia, and this particularly applies to our country, we need to make sure there is a
peace to keep. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure yet that the Russian leadership, or even the Ukrainian leadership, because Ukraine wants to get that territory back, are fully committed to a peacekeeping presence. But again, I think the Australians have indicated they were going to participate. We tend to work over the years. Our military has worked closely with the Australians and the British. And I think we would want to be seen to be willing to help. After all, Ukraine is a big deal for us. The outcome of Ukraine has global ramifications which affect us, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. So we will want to be as cooperative as possible. Whether it's practical for us remains to be seen.
Robert, it strikes me that everyone writing about this, commentating on it, is finding it difficult. I guess in your field of academic endeavour, you work on certain theories or principles, and there are certain doctrines that you know exist amongst countries, and you can make presumptions about what the response to a certain action might be from various parties. It seems to me in this situation we can never be quite sure about what the United States is now going to do because Trump is such a wild card.
He is, and he prides himself on that. And some people, I think, are slightly exaggerating the way the pressure is being put on Moscow. The real pressure on Moscow, I think, will be for Mr. Trump to say to the Russians, there's not going to be any peace in Ukraine until you go back to your internationally recognized borders, because that's the core of the problem. He hasn't taken that step. And I think the Russians, the Putin leadership, feels Mr. Trump is very much on their side. You only have to look at their media to see that. Some media will call him their boy, their man.
Wow.
So we'll just have to see. But I'm not hopeful about this peace initiative because I think the Russians want to freeze the existing situation whereby they've gained this territory since 2022, in fact, since 2014, when they illegally annexed Crimea. And I don't think the Ukrainians are going to accept that in the long term. And I don't think they can. They've lost too many people. And so it seems to me it's going to be a very difficult path at the moment. But you're quite right. To be fair to Mr. Trump, if anybody can do a U-turn, it's him. And it wouldn't take much, let's be quite clear, if Mr. Trump thought he was suddenly being snubbed by Moscow after he'd gone out of his way generously to help them out of what he called a ridiculous war, then I think the backlash could be considerable.
All right, look, just one other international thing I've been looking at that I wonder if you might have an opinion on. This tariff trade war with Canada, that's getting real feisty between both sides, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not surprised about that. I think I spoke to you, Sean, in January.
Yeah.
From Europe, just after I got to Europe from Canada, and the Canadians, right across the political divide, were in no mood to play softly with the Americans. That came across immediately, and I wasn't surprised by Trudeau's hardline comments or the comments of his successor. When we say hardline, they're actually, they feel that they're the aggrieved party, that Mr. Trump. Canada feels it's gone out of its way over the years to be a good friend of the United States, and they feel quite let down and betrayed is the word I heard a lot.
Yeah.
And they've been slapped with these tariffs, and they've been told, well, the tariffs can be removed if you allow us to annex you. And this is an extraordinary thing to say. And now they're piling the tariffs on. But I noticed that it's not just Canada, and there's a real fear. This was the other thing that surprised me. There was a real fear, even in early January, that Mr. Trump, once in power, might try to physically annex Canada.
No.
Which seems almost incredible.